Hello world, Lisa Friedrichsen, your friend and computer science professor with another short screencast about access. In the first one, we talked about the benefits of an access database, and that is basically centralized around having multiple local people sharing the same amount of data, the same set of data, so that as the data is updated, everyone has access to the most accurate, latest copy of that information, no matter if they're looking at a query or they're looking at a report. In this short screencast, we're going to talk about the key object that is required to build a relational database, and that is the table object. Now, in this database, you'll see that I already have 4 tables set up. One of the key aspects of setting up your tables is to make sure that the table refers to one and only one subject. So every record in the table should be one company, one contact, one industry, and one job. If you find yourself duplicating a lot of data in a table, that's a key red flag that you probably have not set your tables up correctly. For example, one company can have many jobs. So if you were to enter that second job in a single table that had both company and job information in it, you would find yourself repeating the company name, the company address, perhaps other information about the company. So as soon as you see repeated information in a table, that's a key red flag that you probably need to break that data out into 2 tables. But I also want to take you back to my books. If you need more information on how to normalize a huge set of data into separate subjects, into separate tables, that's where this Concepts of Database Management book comes in. But if you have a good handle on your tables and you just need to create them in Access, that's where the Microsoft Access textbook comes in. Let's look at the tables that I do have created. The key concept of all of these objects is the fact that they all have 2 views. In the previous screencast, you saw that when we double-click a table, we open it in Datasheet view. That shows the data in the table. If we click this Design button, or we could right-click the object and click Design View, or right-click the tab and click Design View, all of those are 3 different ways of getting into Design View. If we click this Design button, which looks like a triangle, a pencil, and a ruler, a designer's tools, we go into the Design View of the object. In the Design View of the object, that's where you build the structure of the object. And what you see when you're building a table is that there are 2 pieces of information for every column, for every field, the field name and the data type. And if you just switch those words and say the type of data that goes into that column, it makes enormous sense. These field names go across the top of the columns, job ID, company ID, job title. In Excel, that would be column A, B, C. But in Access or relational database, we call that field job ID, field company ID, field job title, field job responsibilities. If we go into Design View, we can see all those field names, and their data types determine then the type of data that can go into that field. So in Starting Salary field, if we tab over there to that last column, we can put in numbers that will be formatted as currency. But if I try and type characters and then tab out, I'm going to get a message from Access that says, hey, you've defined starting salary as a currency field. So you cannot put text into a currency field. It's got to be a number. So I'm going to escape out of that to return that original data. Let's go back to the Design View and say that we want another field, for example, start date. And since this field, this column will only contain dates, I'm going to want to pick a data type of date time so that only dates and times can be entered. If I fail to do that and leave this as short text, and I'll make that mistake and then show you this in Datasheet view, then any old thing such as 1/32/2020 could be entered into that start date. And even though it looks like a valid date, we all know there's not 32 days in January. So I'm going to remove that entry, back to Design View, and make this a date time data type. Save, go back to Datasheet view, and go over to that column. And now, if I try and type in 1/32/2020 and tab out, it's going to say, hey, look, you cannot put that entry into a date time column because that's not a valid date. So I would have to go back to a valid date, and that will be accepted, or I could use the date picker. and pick off a valid date off the date picker. Another nice way to enter data into a date column. Back in design view, you'll also see this bottom pane, the field properties, and they change as I move between these different fields, because if I'm a short text field, I've got a field size property. But if I'm a date time field, then access controls the size of the field, and I don't have that property. So the field properties change based on which field you've selected and what its data type is. All you need to know right now about the field properties is that they are characteristics that further define and refine the field. When there's a required entry for that field property, Access will go ahead and provide that for you. But these other properties that don't have an entry are optional, and if you read in the lower right-hand corner, you can read a little description of what that property would do and how it would modify that column. But in the beginning, when you're building tables, the key things you need to remember are one subject per table, and in design view, you want to set up your field names and pick the correct data type for each column, which will further restrict what you can type into that column, which as you restrict what can type into that column, you're improving the data integrity and the data accuracy of that data, because we cannot now type in bogus dates in the start date column because we've identified it with date data type. When you start an Access database, it's really easy to get eager to enter the data. But I implore you to go into design view of the table, set up your field names, set up your data types first, and then your data entry second. That will really help the integrity and the accuracy of your data entry. Also, you notice that in my field names, I did not include any spaces. You can put spaces in field names. It's allowed in Access, but it is considered a bad habit because spaces in any name in computer science are generally going to give you trouble down the road. That's the basics of creating tables. In our next screencast, we'll connect these tables in one-to-many relationships, which will create a relational database, the benefit of which is reducing the amount of redundant data, which in turn improves the accuracy of your data. And that's a huge concept. But you have to have tables before you can relate them. So that's why I wanted to put this lesson in between an overview of Access and the relationships that we're going to create between tables in the next screencast. Thank you.